Hey everybody, Jake here with TrendSpider to go over the weekend update, something we have not done a ton lately. We had a few different things on the production side where we took a few weeks off, so we're getting back to it. These will probably be twice a month or so. So wanted to definitely do one today as we had some pretty crazy market moves. Now, remember, the market is in a very volatile state right now. So you have news events that maybe sometimes wouldn't drive the markets to move as much as they have, but the market's in just that state right now, so you have to really be nimble with this volatility. So to start off with SPY, you can see here that we did break down through this trend zone that has been acting as an area of interest the last week or so, pretty much since we bottomed out on January 24th. We've been hitting these higher lows. We still have a higher low from today on Friday, but you can see that we did start to break down here a little bit, and something to keep in mind going into the week ahead. I think people are trying to kind of dissect what's moving the market. Is it Russia-Ukraine? Is it fear of bigger rate hikes than initially thought? So these are all going to be things that likely continue to drive the markets in the short term. So on the shorter term side, as I mentioned, we broke down through this area, as you can see here, by this red circle that I'm going to put up. And then if you want to look at the longer term side of things, we still are holding this point of control from the COVID low. So the COVID low being this area right here. And you can see here that we, for now, are just kind of retracing the move that we had. But if we do continue down, we could retest those areas tested in late January. Notice that we've got this volume gap here. There's not a lot of liquidity below. You can see that we did have this wick here, and that kind of played out very similar to how the next week or two could if we do continue down, just not a ton of liquidity. This is the area that you want to see hold. This is where a lot of shares are currently holding at. So this is kind of your break-even demand zone. And so based on this, since the COVID low, this big volume bar represents that this is where majority of shares are essentially holding it at this point around break even. So we'll have to see if this area holds. If not, we could definitely be retesting the previous lows, and we'll just go from there. But all in all, a pretty ugly Friday and end to the week. And I'm actually not going to do individual names just because the market is moving based on a lot of macro external factors, and that's going to play into probably any individual chart that you look at. So really keeping an eye on the broad markets is what's going to be important going into the week ahead. The Qs broke through this anchored VWAP pinch here. So we had a swing low anchored VWAP, which was holding for about 4 days in a row. In early February, we retested the swing high anchored VWAP that we tested in early February on Wednesday, and then just have pretty much gone straight down after CPI, and then whoever knows what's going on with Russia going into the weekend. So definitely keep an eye on things, especially maybe look at Bitcoin over the weekend to get an idea of how the markets may move into the week ahead, since those are really the only markets that are open going into the weekend. Now, on the weekly side of things, you can see here that we do have this longer term trend zone, and which is right in line with this low here, and that's where I anchored a VWAP from. So we have the VWAP and the trend zone starting both right here, and let's see, what is that actual month? So that is from July 2020. That's the start of this point here. So you can see here that this did act as a very nice level over the last couple weeks as a bounce area and a level of interest. And you can see these areas are now aligning almost perfectly. Once again, you've got your trend zone here. You've got your anchored VWAP from July of 2020. So if we do continue down, that area is right around 335. So not only would that be a retest of the previous low, but it's right in line with this trend zone and this anchored VWAP from that area, which was a relevant zone in late January. So keep that in mind. Around 335 would be your area to watch here. And the fact that we did break down isn't necessarily, a time to panic. Notice that we also broke down through this area before. So this swing low anchored VWAP is definitely not perfect. So just keep that in mind when we are noting that we did break down through this area. But it is also important to note that it was respected 4 times in a row in early February, and we finally broke down through it. So definitely not only a VWAP area, but also just a basic horizontal level that we broke down for those price action traders just looking at horizontal levels. A definite breakdown into the last day of the week this week. Going into IWM actually was green for a little bit on today on Friday, and then you did have the overall markets just continue to roll over and sell off into the close. I got a slight bounce into the end of the day, but overall, if you're really just putting this in perspective, we're retesting the level that we were at on Tuesday. So not really the time to panic quite yet. I think a lot of people are. And, that may set up for some decent opportunities into the week ahead. You can see here the swing low anchored VWAP from January 28th did hold almost perfectly to the penny. So that would be an area to watch around 199 right on the dot, 200 being your psychological level here on the daily chart for IWM. And then on the weekly chart, if we did continue down, on a longer term side of things, you definitely would want to watch the COVID low anchored VWAP, which acted almost as a perfect level a couple weeks ago for a bounce zone. But notice that this is a function of time. So this is actually slightly increased since late January. And so that area is right around 190. So keep that in mind going forward, and we'll see how that plays out. Now, one thing that I always like to do is look at any candle that has a wick like this. So if I turn on the raindrop chart, you'll see here that we actually had a decent amount of volume at the top of the range. Now, a raindrop chart should not be used as an end-all be-all. This doesn't mean, we've got a decent amount of volume at the top of the range in this wick. Definitely bullish into next week. It's just an observation. It is interesting to see that with that big of a wick that we had on the weekly regular candle, that a lot of that volume is actually focused at the top of the range. It's definitely something on the bull thesis side of things. And when you are looking at the markets, you always want to have a bull and a bear thesis. It doesn't even matter if you're long or short. You still want to know the other side of the trade to understand what maybe someone who's betting against you is looking at. And that's how you can keep yourself honest. So in this case, definitely not as bad of a day as you'd think, with IWM definitely being more of a risk-on asset and only down, not even as down as much as some of your broader indices. So that is something to definitely keep in mind. And then going into your really risk-on assets, your Bitcoins and your Ethereums, you definitely did have a pretty big move down today, but still, in the grand scheme of things, compared to where we've been and where we're at now, this is just a slight blip in the radar and hardly a reason to really panic too much at this point. So if you're looking at the swing high anchored VWAP from the November high, you will see here that we have a volume shelf here. So this has been an area where the price was able to initially consolidate at on the way up. Once we did have a nice base moving up off of it. Almost got up to the anchored VWAP above. Didn't necessarily get the full move. But now we're pretty much right back to this area. So this shelf just represents there's a lot of volume holding here. And this generally will at least act as a short-term area of support. Now, as long as the price action kind of stays above this area, that will be a level of interest. As soon as we move down through this area, that's when I'd anchor a VWAP from this low here from January 23rd. And you'll see if we do break down through this area, let's say right around 41.5, then you could target the VWAP below, which is right around 39,000. So anytime you're looking at the markets, it needs to be an if-then. If somebody asks me what I think is going to happen, my immediate reaction is, well, if this happens, then I'm going to think this. If that happens, then I'm going to think that. In this case, if we break down through this shelf around, let's say 41,500, then the target below would be around 39. If we break above this area, let's say around 44K, which is just your psychological level over the last few days, then we could retest that swing high, which is swing high anchored VWAP, which is right around 47K. But right now we're trading right in between these two VWAPs, and your real trigger points here would be 41.5 and then 44K on the upside. Those are your if levels. If it breaks down below 41.5, then watch this. If it breaks above 44K and closes above that on the daily, then we should definitely be looking for that VWAP above around 47K. Now on the weekly side of things, what's really interesting here is this COVID low anchored VWAP with these offsets. So I get a lot of questions a lot of the time. Why do you use offsets? How do you come up with them? Well, in this case, all I did was, let's just delete this offset. You'll see here's your original VWAP. So this is your COVID VWAP here, this dark blue line. I want to take into account some of this price action that didn't get all the way down to that line, but did act as a reversal point. And so you'll see here, if I go in and add a percentage band, and in this case, I've already pre-figured out that it's about a 12.5% band on the upside, you'll see that this area, this secondary 12.5% band above it, has acted as a pretty strong level of interest multiple times since the COVID low. And once again, it acted as a really nice level, a zone back in late January for a reversal point. And remember, anytime you're looking at the markets, it needs to be a function of a zone, not just, oh, we're going to hit 31,973. That's just not, it's just not realistic, especially for crypto. I mean, you have to have a margin of error of a couple percent most of the time if you're watching levels, especially on the weekly candle for Bitcoin or even Ethereum. So in this case, some people may simply call this a little bit of a bear flag. In that case, you'd have this type of setup here. And we'll just have to see what happens going into the weekend. The weekend can be very long. Fridays, you definitely can have some very interesting activity. We've seen that over the last couple months, some pretty big moves on Friday nights, at least on the US side of things. So for now, bear thesis would be potentially just this bear flag forming in a retest of this zone below. Bull thesis would be price holds this shelf here and we get a retest of not only maybe the highs around 45,800, but that swing high anchored VWAP, which is right around 47K. Next one we'll go into is Ethereum. This will be the last one we look at. And as I mentioned, we're just going to do the broad markets here because the broad markets are really what is driving individual names right now. And so you'll see here that the swing high anchored VWAP is right around 3,400. So if we did, for some reason, reverse here, that would be your target above if we broke above this high. So if we moved up, then this area above around 3,300 would be a target. If we broke that and closed above it, then your swing high anchored VWAP would be your target above. Now, this is very interesting. We already kind of have this playing out pretty similar to what we just said if what happens in Bitcoin happens, which is that break below this shelf. Well, we're breaking below it. So then that's when I would pull up a VWAP here. And your target below could be as low as 2,700. That's where your swing low VWAP is. So this is almost kind of maybe forward looking a little bit on Bitcoin. If Bitcoin's going to break that volume shelf, then Ethereum may be the leader in this current environment. So if we break down through 3,000, which we have, then the target below would be your VWAP, as I mentioned, around 2,700. So not necessarily what I'd call the strongest price action for the bull side of things here. Now, if you look at the weekly chart, it looks very similar to Bitcoin here. We have the VWAP offsets as well, if I can choose the right one. And you'll see here that did act as well as very strong levels of interest for bounces in the last year. So September 2020 low is where we start the VWAP from. You've got this huge capitulation candle, and then you can see we slowly grind it up from there. And you can see how many times this area has acted as a level of interest. And once again, it did back in late January. And same thing goes here. Is this simply just a bear flag? We'll have to see, but that would definitely be part of the thesis, I would assume, for anyone who's maybe trying to short crypto here. You've just got this pretty textbook flag here on the bear side of things for the weekly chart. Now, what's interesting is notice that at least on the weekly candle for the raindrop side of things, you can see a decent amount of volume here. The problem is we have 2.5 days left. The crypto markets close their weekly candle on Sundays, not on Fridays. So there's still a lot that can happen here. You had a lot of weekly raindrops change a lot. from the beginning of Friday on some of these equity names and indices to the end of Friday. So this is one that could also change a lot. But for now, I did this video on Friday. You can see that it's still showing a decent amount of volume at the top of that range, showing there is some conviction by buyers absorbing some of that supply. However, the fact that we did break below this volume shelf has me leaning more bearish, but I'm not here to try to predict the markets for anyone watching this video. I'm here to highlight some of the ways you can use TrendSpider to really view the markets, not only from a volume standpoint, but also just straight price action standpoint as well. So that is it. Hopefully this video was helpful to get a recap going into next week. As I mentioned, the broad markets are really making the market for even some of these individual names. So definitely keep an eye on the indices going into Monday. And if you do want to kind of have a weekend futures way of looking at the markets, just watch crypto. Crypto is definitely going to be your best gauge on what we can potentially expect on Monday. And the news coming out of Russia definitely is not going to calm the markets at all unless they somehow, over the weekend, someone figures out what's going on. If you're on Twitter, you've seen literally different news stories every 5 minutes of Russia's about to invade, or Russia has not confirmed they're invading, or the U.S. hasn't confirmed that they're invading. I don't think really anybody knows what's going to happen, but these speculative news stories coming out definitely are moving the market, and that's what you should expect going into the week ahead as well. So everyone, thank you so much. Remember, if you do want to give TrendSpider a shot, we do have the 7-day free trial. Just go to TrendSpider.com, and we do have that link in the comments section or the details section of this video. So check that out. And if you do enjoy these videos, please like and subscribe. As I mentioned, we'll probably be doing these twice a month or so, given the schedule of the production team. And yeah, thanks everybody for watching, and have a great weekend.